hit record. So we lied to everybody. We said we were done with this season of Mention and Dispatches, and here we are back with a bonus episode. Why? Well, because David and Stennis dragged us back in here. David, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, but you need that GIF from Godfather Part 3 where Pacino cries out about being pulled back in.
Yeah. And so if we've got David here talking Napoleonics, of course we have our buddy Cyrano. Jim is back. Welcome, Jim.
Good evening.
So, look, I'm not kidding when I say this is all David's fault, because David, you're the guy that had to go and launch a new line of really cool Napoleonic minis after we were done recording the season. So, like, I'm not 100% sure what your problem was with the timing on all of this.
We can talk about that if you want.
Please explain yourself.
There's been some problems with the timing.
Yeah. So, you know. Your Honor, I'm allowing the witness to take the stand. Please explain yourself. What that vert the flirt, right?
Do we want to start with why now and why not?
First of all, wait. We'll get there. But David sent me toys. He sent you 2 toys, right, Brent?
I have toys.
We have toys.
I mean, like,
you both should have the same
audio
toy.
show.
We both have. Okay, Brent. Without looking at them, what nation are these toys from?
I'm guessing they are French.
All right. Well done. Well done. Points to you, sir. They are indeed. So well done. No, these are, first of all, let's talk I'd like to talk very, very specifically about these toys. But first things first, you have released through the Wargaming company a line of blank millimeter Napoleonic minis.
Am I supposed to fill in the blank?
You are supposed to fill in that blank.
10 millimeter.
They are 10 millimeter, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know, Brian, if you remember the fuss that I made when another company that I will not name.
As soon as you were asking the question, I knew where you were going with this.
Oh, okay then. I will not name it.
Broaching the question of existing standards?
Yes. Well, here's the thing, and this is, I still feel this way. And I feel this way rather passionately. The reality of it is one company is going to struggle no matter what it does to fill all the gaps. And I'm going to ask you that question before the night is out. But any company is going to struggle to fill all the gaps. So a person like me who wants to do all sorts of crazy Napoleonic campaigns and might want to do Ottomans, might want to do Saxons, hi Chrono, and all the other stuff that the people that I know love, they know that there's going to be a hard time covering the whole table. And so coming out with a uniform standard is a great idea because it partners well with other companies. It shares the space and it builds the hobby and it gives people a chance to compare and contrast. So first of all, huge points, in my humble opinion, to David for coming out with a 10 millimeter line. This is awesome. But what's really revolutionary to me, as someone who was raised on figures like ESCI, which I've always pronounced SG, I don't know, Hat and Atlantic, and yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, Airfix. This is a new generation. These figures are plastic? ?
Yes.
I don't know how deep I want to go down this rabbit hole. But
it's a little bit of a rabbit. I can't go that.
Yeah, I don't want to take it too far.
Deep, but
this is a whole new generation of plastic.
Yeah, this is like hard plastic that doesn't snap as soon as you look at it sideways.
Right. Well, number one, it doesn't snap when you look at it sideways, but it's also not rubbery.
Yes.
Highly flexible, and therefore almost certain to chip the paint you try to put on it.
Yeah. These are not yoga minis.
There you go. So you have done both. You have done both these things. 10 millimeter plastic minis, built, of course, for the greatest period of all Wargaming, Napoleonic. And I guess we've talked a little bit about why you went here, but can you reveal? Have you told us who's your sculptor, if you can say?
We've actually had, hang on, I gotta count. They haven't all been sculpted by the same person. Most of them have been sculpted by the same person, who I don't think I've ever disclosed, but it's a woman from Spain, and she's phenomenal.
Yes, she is.
The French that you guys have were not sculpted by her. They were sculpted by a woman in, I think, the Czech Republic, if I remember correctly, because we started this project. So we started this project. I guess our official date is effectively 8 May 2019. I looked back on it when we finally announced our pre-orders. I went back in my email. I kind of personal curiosity to figure out how long the hell have we been doing this. I feel older. What's going on?
Bless you.
I do remember you mentioning it once that you had started this before the pandemic.
Yeah. So it's been a while. And so the first email that I have to a contractor kicking off the project is 8 May of 2019. And that was the first company that we had working as a sculpt manager for us under contract, and the sculptor who did our preliminary stuff and a vast library of parts. I'm honestly not sure if I ever knew her name, but she was from Eastern Europe, I think the Czech Republic, and did a fantastic job. And so the figures that you've got, those were done by her. Since then, I want to say that we have had 3 other sculptors, and the majority of the line has been sculpted by one of them, who happens to be a woman in Spain. And they, despite the fact that different people have worked on them, the question comes up, how well do they match with each other? That I actually have to think about who did them when to know who did them. But it's a little bit similar to traditional hand sculpting and a little bit different at the same time, in that there is a library of parts that gets built when doing digital sculpting.
Yeah.
And so for the most part, we have overwhelmingly reused those pieces. So it's sculpt a musket once, sculpt a French shako once, sculpt a Russian shako once, etc. Yeah. And that helps quite a lot. So the original sculptor that we had built out dollies for us and a large library, and then everyone else that we've worked with has added to them.
Now you sort of leapt ahead to my next question, which was obviously I'm from the first. I actually poured my own minis once upon a time because Don Featherstone told me in one of his books that it would definitely be safe to make a model out of plaster of Paris and pour lead into it.
Okay.
So
did you breathe deeply?
I did. The one thing it did say is be very careful. Don't put your face over you make a mold and you stick a hole in the top of it and then you pour the lead into the hole at the top.
Yeah.
And it said, don't look over the hole because if there's any moisture in there, that lead is going to come shooting back out.
Yeah.
And so it did say that.
So, Jim, hang on, because I feel like anybody that listens to this podcast is probably not too taken aback by the fact that we started in the middle of a conversation here. But to set the stage for anyone who expected something remotely resembling a normal conversation here, David, what the heck are we playing with? We've got some minis from the Wargaming company. You guys have done rule books and campaign guides and painting guides and all kinds of stuff forever. Now you've got your own minis. Let's start at the beginning. You guys decided to make some minis. We just talked about sculpting these things. What are the boxes we're seeing? Which ones are coming? How quickly are they getting here? What are people playing with them? Let's sort of back up to sort of not starting Monopoly on the second trip around the board.
I was very excited. I'll be over here.
I'll be over here looking at my minis.
You just wait for us on New Jersey Avenue. We'll round the corner and get to you here in a second.
So I'll give you some bullet points. Yeah, we do an operational level Napoleonic miniatures game at Sans Resultant or ESR Napoleonics. We released a new edition of that a year ago this past January. That's gone off rather well. We had hoped to launch our own miniature line later that spring, and unfortunately we'll probably end up talking about the unfortunate events, or the unfortunate or not, the events that resulted in that's happening now instead of then. And what have we got and what are we launching with are different questions. So what are we launching with? We're launching with 2 boxes. There are approximately 400-ish figures in each. I think the French might be a little under. I think the Russians might be a little bit over in each box. It's a complete command for a player if you're playing ESR. It's a couple divisions of infantry all fleshed out with artillery complement, with sapper teams, with cav, appropriate disposition of command figures and elite figures. We include bases, we include flags, we include generals and such. So you can build that box, and your buddy can build an opposing box. And we're launching with the French and Russians to begin with, and for the mid-war, which is 1808 to 1812. So we've got our 1812 book is available. Our first Iberia book covering 1808 and Spain and Portugal is available. The French are also useful for there. And
the Russians less so.
The Russians less so. Those would be some yet more unhappy Russians if they found themselves in Spain.
It depends. Like, a couple of Spanish women, they're probably fine, Sharp-eyed readers of Tuesday Newsday have already known about these boxes because we've put them in Tuesday Newsday both the last 2 weeks. Well, as people are listening to this like 3 and 4 weeks ago, people would have spotted these already in Tuesday Newsday that hey, these are coming. Here's where to go order them. Yada yada yada.
So those are available for pre-order now. And they also include stat cards. They also include order markers. So it's a playable set out of the box. You need to grab yourself a rule book and whatever amount of tabletop terrain
or a
you
friend
want.
that has a rule book,
right? And sit down with a buddy. But those are available for pre-order now. We plan to be shipping them in July. We'll have them at Historicon with us unless, I don't know, something horrible happens. And there's $79 during the pre-order period. They're scheduled to be $100 after release, $99. And
still insanely cheap for the number of figures you've got in there.
Thank you. Yes, that was the plan. That was also part of the holdup, to be fair.
I mean, look, I'm not the Napoleonic expert. That's why we have Jim here. But I do have a sense of what the market looks like just from checking things for Tuesday Newsday all the time and being able to go back and add those for folks and say, hey, this is on sale. This costs X amount for this kind of set. By the way, it's on sale, but it still costs a house payment. All those different things. So yeah, if you're under $100 for a complete playable set of 400-ish figures, that's a ridiculous deal.
And it's not 400 infantry guys. I mean, I know I just kind of went over the contents, but we use rear area markers in ESR called Reformation areas. And so there's wagons and train teams and field forges and caissons and neat, cool stuff that you normally kind of pay an arm and a leg for in the general market. Is in there, but we wanted to make it as approachable as possible from a cost standpoint and from play.
Yep. So we've now got French, Russians, assuming that there's others coming at some. We're not going to ask you to commit to a date, given the odyssey it's taken us to get here. But at some point in the future, we're going to see some additional ones. At this point, I think we've rounded the corner on the Monopoly board. We're in the middle of the game. Jim, take over.
Okay, this is the box for those who have played ESR is intended to be a force. Yes,
that's correct. The two boxes that we're starting with are complete force packs.
I'm making notes over here. I'm trying to do.
I was wondering if I said something wrong. Jim just goes silent.
No. That's sort of. I guess you say that. So I did want to confirm it.
No, I know what's going through Jim's head. What's going through Jim's head right now is that he's told everybody multiple times, emphatically, he is done with the arts and crafts of miniatures wargaming, and now he's trying to figure out how he can go back on that statement without looking like he's gone back on that statement. That's what's going through his head right now.
Well,
we can help you, Jim.
You're not going to help my sense of honor. You're just going to help me get miniatures, which are lovely and fun. So looking at the minis, I guess I want to ask you, and we may have asked you this the first time around, and I'm just curious if you have the same opinion, a different opinion. If you have an opinion, are metals dead for minis?
Not yet.
But I mean, long term, there's a lot of things that are slowly dying.
I don't know if metals are ever actually going to die, but I think that you are going to. I think that you're going to see a constant progression away from metal, and so the question becomes, it's like any kind of measurement. At what point is it small enough that people go, it doesn't really matter? I think that's a distance out yet. You're going to see I believe that you're going to see a large transition as and I don't want to sound dismissive in this, but there's a sea change in generational player base. There's also a sea change going on in generation of business base, and the companies that we all three know, and I'm guessing lots of your listeners know, that have been with us for so long that we would think of as sort of the hallmarks of mini gaming or of historical miniatures gaming. I honestly don't think that a whole lot of those are going to be sold. I think that
you mean the company being sold, not the inventory.
Correct. Yeah, I don't think that those companies are going to transition ownership to a new generation. Some may, but I suspect that most won't. And that's for a handful of reasons.
Sort of projecting as a member of the industry. This is not that you've got some kind of insider information from having talked to these guys. You're just taking your best. No,
this is just my impression of what I think is likely to happen. This is not based on, nobody told me any secrets of I'm not selling and it's going to the grave, with nothing like that. The reason that I suspect that the companies that we know and have loved, have supported the hobby to this time and will so for a time yet, are unlikely to transition ownership is because of, I suspect, the technology transition that's going to happen in manufacturing. You ask, are metals dead? Well, they're not dead yet. But right now, it is less expensive for me to create a line than to buy one off of somebody. It's going to be, if you owned a prominent miniatures company for the last however many decades and you wanted to retire and you were going to sell it to me, the likelihood that you could justify selling it to me for the cost of starting a new line probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And a large part of that is not because of the strict costs. You've already got a manufacturing environment. Great. Except that's not a value to me because I'm probably not going to use your manufacturing environment. I'm either trying to find a way to do hips or I'm trying to find a way to do CO cast.
Okay. So given just that, how is it not dead? Well, I think this is what I was thinking of. Is when you made the comment that you're now, and I'm assuming whatever the extension might be, you're designing STLs.
Correct.
And you're getting
we're
STLs.
Doing digital sculpts. They get exported to an STL. A master gets printed, or if you're doing hips or PVC, the CNC machine uses that STL file to do its churning on the metal.
So the whole model, no pun intended, I guess, of metal minis, the things I've loved since I was younger than my son. That's weird. But that I've loved since I was younger than my son is built around a craftsperson scraping away at a model, creating a master, and then pouring a liquid metal into a mold. And the thing that, as you correct, of course you're right. You do this, I don't. But the thing that was of value were those models, were the green stuff figures, and the molds. Well, you don't need any of that,
right? From a business transitioning standpoint, right? That's the problem. That's why I look at it and say that the likelihood that that some random linchpin of the industry that's been around for 20 or 30 or 40 years is likely to be around in 20 or 30 or 40 years under a second or third generation of ownership is low, is because I'm not better off buying their IP, right? Their intellectual property, the greens and the master molds, I'm not better off buying that than I am creating my own. In fact, if I buy theirs, that's probably just a bridge until I can afford to create my own to replace theirs, at which point, why did I buy theirs?
So is that just a function of the evolution of manufacturing and production, or is that a function of you wanting sort of your own artistic stamp on what it is you're doing? Is that a function of these things are just old and going to wear out after a time? Look, the right answer is probably some combination of all of the above. But
I think it's the first one. I think that it's a change in manufacturing. And I think it's a maturing of the industry. I think that you've got
Wait, Jim, did he just call gamers mature?
No. He said the industry is mature.
Okay, just checking.
sci-fi and fantasy did this a long time ago, right? And they had different economics of scale and a different market to do it in. It's related. It's not that distant. I mean, I would argue that it's not like we're cousins. We live in the same house even. But they moved to a model of some mass manufacturing, also a lot of business to business OEM production. And it's not like that hasn't existed in metals, right? I mean, there are metal casters out there, and there have been a bunch of them. Metal doesn't really scale worth a crap. It's very labor intensive. And that was sort of acceptable until the pandemic. And then metal prices also went stupid high. And so now it's highly labor intensive. If anybody's noticed, the labor market appears to have changed over the course of the last 5 years as well.
You don't say.
And
I may have noticed.
And the material got more expensive, and it came down, but it's not going back to where it was by any stretch. So the material got more expensive, the labor got more expensive, and it's labor intensive to deal with. Oh, and it's toxic. It's don't breathe in when you're atomizing.
It'll kill you.
The tin in the melting pot. So the great thing about metal was that it was very cheap to get into. You could spend a relatively low sum of money and get a metal casting set up. And that provided low cost of entry for companies to start up. But there's nowhere to go from. Scaling it it doesn't. So you might be able to scale your business, but you're not going to be able to scale that bit. And your business is built around that bit. So you're always going to suffer from it. High impact polystyrene is your traditional hard plastic. That is not easy entry level. The costs are high, right? You're going to pay 10 grand a mold. Now that mold's never going to wear out as far as you're concerned, right? It'll do 500,000 shots. And so for miniatures production, you mostly just don't care. Its life is infinite, but it's a high cost of entry because you're not going to need one mold. And we'd need a lot. and so there's an issue there. The output is less expensive. The other thing about that is that's now available in the US. And it wasn't 15 years ago. It wasn't 20 years ago. You can hire a US manufacturer to do hips and to do hips well. And I think that the domestic factor matters because most miniatures companies are not Games Workshop or Warlord or Battlefront. Most miniatures companies exist between Firelock, who's not small, they're not tiny, they're much bigger than I am, but they exist somewhere between, most companies exist between Firelock and me, or just south of me maybe. And so the question is, what can we spin up? Well, can I put somebody on a plane to China if we have a quality problem? No, I can't. Can I put somebody on a plane to Florida? Yeah, I can. Okay. So domestic production
Florida,
matters. Don't get me wrong, Florida. But domestic production matters as lowering the entry bar for smaller shops to be able to start up, because it's not just the cost of doing the thing, it's the cost of managing and administering the thing and the risk associated with that should it go bad. And you can fly across the country and it might cost you $1,000 for the weekend, which isn't nothing, but that
doesn't even get you in the cargo hold going to China.
it's not it's not another 16 hours from San Francisco. Yeah. Plus a whole bunch of preliminaries. So it lowers the entry bar a lot. And I think that's important. Yeah, I think I got way off base on your question, but
no. Well, I mean, I do think it's interesting that we did a big thing, 2 years ago or so when the supply chain stuff was just going batshit crazy about how game costs were starting to spiral and skyrocket because of just shipping issues, and part of it was pandemic related, part of it was cargo space availability related. There were a ton of different reasons. Some of it was just straight up resource constraints, but the truth was a lot of manufacturers in the board game space, not the mini space, but in the board game space, were stuck having to use overseas printing, whether they wanted to or not, simply because the manufacturing they needed did not exist in North America. The people they needed to make specific kinds of boxes or punch boards or whatever it was simply did not exist in the US. And it's funny because people that don't know the industry will say, well, sure it does. You're just not looking hard enough. We're talking to people whose mortgage payments depended on getting these answers right. I'm going to take their word over some internet chucklehead chiming in on a YouTube video. Sorry, I just am.
Book printing.
The guys,
as simple as book printing.
Yeah.
Book printing is not simple, but in the scheme of things that the human race has figured out how to do, book printing is simple.
Yeah.
And book printing got hard over the pandemic, right? I mean, the consolidation of printers in the industry has been huge, and it puts a lot of pressure. The shop that I might have gone to 5 years ago and said, hey, can you run me 2,000 books for a print run? And they'd go, oh yeah, that's sure, we can do that. It's X number of dollars. It'll take 30 days. Maybe it'll take 6 weeks. When the pandemic hit, between the pressure on them from consolidation, along with supply shortages, we literally had a printer tell us it would be 9 months.
Yeah. Well,
from the time we submitted the files.
Yeah. So that was the lead into, you guys are finding actual no shit manufacturers that are creating physical goods for you here in the US. And that's kind of cool. That's for whatever other supply chain issues might have happened. The fact is you found somebody here in the US that can do this stuff for you. And I'm not just trying to be all jingoistic, rah USA kind of stuff, because I know we got listeners in Europe and around the world, and that's great. But the core of your buying public is probably US based. The core of our listenership, I know the stats because I've looked at them, is like 70% US based. So that's the audience we're mainly talking to here. You found somebody stateside to make this stuff for you, and that's kind of cool. You are a rare bird in the game world at this point.
It's been positive, and the biggest thing it's nice to be able to say, man, the USA, because I mean I was grew up in the 80s, but just from a practical business standpoint. I got a good friend who says, the best contractor you ever have is somebody who's within driving distance so you can put your hands around their neck.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm a big fan of having to go.
It's harder to screw with people when they're farther away or when they're closer. When they're farther away, it's easy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of being able to go stand on someone's desk to get something done if you have to.
Yeah, it's distance does have a specific business effect.
Yeah. Yep. I think we're throwing this back to Jim to sort of pick up with. We keep digressing out of where Jim is going with stuff.
Well, no, and I'm absolutely fascinated. I have actually, one of the questions I was going to follow up with is the one you suggested, Brant, which is, well, wait a minute. Does that mean that, and I'm trying to picture what a physical plant now looks like. Are we now saying it's more accessible to, yes, local firms, local craftspeople? And it sounds like, we're all getting a shot at it, which is really cool. But now I want to ask, I'm looking at your fig, and I think you know what this is, David, because you've painted miniatures. You look at a mini and you sort of pick the paints off your shelf that you in your mind, like, okay, that's probably French blue, and that's going to be that white, and we'll do something there. But the second thing you do is track around the mini to figure out what is confusing, like what is that thing?
Yep.
And also, what am I going to hate having to get at?
Yes. What is physical access of the end of my brush?
Right. I've got paint on my brush, and I do not, because I don't care if the whole freaking world is going to be standing 6 feet away and looking at my 10 millimeter mini. I'm going to know that the underside of his arm right by that pack has a spot of white on it when it should be blue.
I'm looking at, I've got 2 inches from my eye, spun up at some weird angle. But that is the angle from which I am viewing it, and therefore I am concerned. Yeah.
So I guess as a designer of minis, or as someone who has to supervise at least the production of minis.
Yeah, that part more.
I
wouldn't say I designed them, but yeah.
What's the hardest thing?
I'm not sure.
Way to stump the guest there, Jim.
Yeah, I'm pondering here. So I guess the hardest thing is, okay, and this ties back to some of your other questions. The hardest thing is that it's digital.
Huh, okay.
So what's the process look like, right? The process looks like, in broad strokes, we've published campaign guides. We've got these uniform plates. They're 2D art, line drawings that have been colored so people can paint from them. Those are what we provide to the sculptor. Those are it's not primary source like primary source with research, but that's the primary material that we want them using. Because, as you say, how do I identify that bit? And our answer is, there are no bits on the sculpted figure that we produced, that we sold you, that are not represented on the uniform plate in the painting guide that we sold you. You're not going to go, oh gosh, but he's got this thing on his back, and I don't know what that is, because it's in the painting guide. There's a one-to-one relationship for that. So the sculptor does that, great. Then they send me screenshots. Eventually they'd send me STLs so I can spam around and look at them more easily, because I'm not spending time in ZBrush, which is what they're primarily sculpted in. And the big problem is the fact that on my screen, the thing's huge. And in reality, my thumb is huge compared to the figure.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's, oh man, that's kind of a mind trip. Yeah.
So you evaluate it in a very different form than it is ultimately to be. And that's very difficult, because there are times that the biggest concern that I have in dealing with the sculpting team is that I am hassling them about a thing that doesn't matter. And conversely, because I'm going to shrink it. And I mean, our miniatures, we've printed them bigger because the masters are printed before they're put in the molds and injection molded. But we've printed them bigger, and you can print them quite a bit bigger before they start looking like they're missing things. But the converse of that is that, am I not hassling them about something that I should, that I'm going to regret later? Because here's a question. You guys have got pre-production French line and French Leger. So did you notice the pockets are wrong?
No.
Come on, Jim. Did you notice the pockets are wrong?
I totally, definitely did not.
They're fixed on the production ones, so nobody will care. But and I don't know why anybody would notice, but somebody out there may. But
no, hush. That would be on Miniature Marketplace within days.
But
if not hours.
The figures that you've got, the pre-production ones, have the Leger officers have got horizontal pocket flaps instead of vertical ones.
Brant, we have collector's items.
And I'll tell you, the biggest kick out of this that I get is they're 10 millimeter and they have pocket flaps.
Yeah.
There's a square buttons joke just waiting to be made.
Oh no, Brad, don't you realize that joke is now officially morphed into pocket flaps?
Yeah, but it's really hard to make pocket flaps out of high impact plastic that we can attach.
Oh yeah, that's true. Le bataillon de boutons carrés. Yeah.
Right?
So, yeah,
I mean, we've made square buttons for everybody but Vance that they can wear on their badge lanyards as part of their flair. We would have a hard time doing pocket flaps.
The hardest thing, Jim, is maintaining perspective of the way you evaluate it is so very different from the final product in terms of the size. And so you pay a lot of attention to things, and you second guess, should I be so concerned about X or Y or whatever? Should I be concerned about the angle of that Shako brim? And it's like, oh, well, definitely I should look at it. It's glaring. It's terrible. Well, then you shrink it to, the size of your thumbnail, and you go, oh, well, crap. It doesn't. Well, it's fine.
There's a Facebook group for Wargame artwork that it cracks me up, because people post these 4-inch square hey, check out these counters I made. And they're like, super detailed line drawings with a watermark flag in the background and like 17 different numeric factors on there. And so you put in the comments, hey, what size are these going to be printed at? 5/8 of an inch. There's a 0% chance you can read fuck all on that counter at 5/8 of an inch.
Well,
right?
so that's
really nicely detailed Swiss guard is going to be a blob of lines at that point.
And 4 years ago, when we first started this, I probably have STLs of it. I might have ZBrush files of it, but the first draft figures that we had done, it was a British flank company guy in a stovepipe Shaco, and it looks amazing. If you shrunk it, it would look like crap. The amount of we spent close, probably around 3-4 months, maybe a little bit longer, maybe closer towards 6. Was getting over the hump of how much do we actually have to remove before it's useful in the scale that we're going to deal in. The thing that we originally started with could have been several inches high and it will look great. But you make it 1 to 160, it would look like garbage. And so there's always an exaggeration, and I would proudly say that I think that ours are better proportion than any I'm aware of. In fact, I honestly think that they're better proportion than quite a bit of stuff larger than them until you get around 25s or 28s. But that doesn't mean that they're true proportion to people. If they were true proportion to people, you wouldn't like them.
Well, that actually was my next question, because that surely is one of the eternal questions of every model maker, right?
Yeah.
It's that if do I make the head big enough to take detail, big enough to notice it, even though if you really looked at it, this guy had the head of the size of a watermelon.
Yeah. And ours are, it is strange to talk about because ours are a lot truer proportioned than what's available on the market, but that doesn't mean that they're true proportioned. Their hands are bigger than my hand. Are their hands the maul that you're used to seeing? No. But they're still not actually the scale size of a hand, because if they were, there wouldn't be a place for you to put paint.
So now we're going to make hand size jokes. Okay. Got it.
No, I'm still stuck on horizontal pockets. Don't you worry about
it. And will be for some time yet.
Trust me, you.
Here comes the 10th season of the Armchair Dragoons podcast, mentioned in dispatches. Let's thank all of our Patreon supporters who pledged at the top level. A huge thank you to Staggerwing, Martok, Patrick Garrity, Fred and his dog, Mike Quigley, Joseph Knorr, Treb Corey, Robert, Patrick Mullen, Kevin Bertram, Chet Bell, and Hellcat6 for their support of the Armchair Dragoons and helping us to bring you the best strategy gaming content on the web. You too can sign up as a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/armchairdragoons.
So I think, and I'm this is not a facetious question. I'm throwing it out there in case you guys know things that I don't. I think that we're the first mass-produced, digitally sculpted plastic line in this scale. I don't think for Napoleonics. I don't know about other genres.
I'll defer to Jim because I wouldn't know one way or the other.
I mean, yeah.
Jim's trying to figure out whether or not tabletop simulator figures count.
No, I could there be something sitting in a warehouse in Sri Lanka waiting for paint? Yeah, I guess. But anything at this size, anything at this scope? No, I mean, there is, to Brant's earlier snarky remark about my having eschewed the arts and crafts side of the hobby, a phrase I got from him, by the way. Having said that, this is truly a where have you been all my life type deal, because this is
St. Paul, Minnesota, mostly. I've lived a couple other places. I was in North Carolina for a while. I lived in Cali for a while, but mostly here.
This is very much what I wanted to do. I mean, I got, as is known by the folks who follow this channel, I got into 25 millimeter minifigs because that's what the group here at home was playing. But I very, very quickly saw the merits of 15s. And frankly, given my other interests and the fact that my paintings, not to say you can't paint these to a standard, I can see certainly how you could, but given a nice balance of playability and paint, or gaming and arts and crafts, it is truly a really cool thing. I just think I would have noticed it. I really do. I mean, back in my day when Ross Heroics was dominating the small scale market, I mean, I had a friend once who painted up some Civil War guys, referred to the artillerists as the little matchstick guys. Because they basically they got a dot of flesh, a bunch of gray, and a red kepi. That was it.
Yeah.
Bam, 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 bam. Even the sixes that you see coming out from Bacchus and things. But no, in terms of this scale, mass produced in this material, I mean, obviously, my first question was centered around the fact that you have terrific companies like Pendraken and some of the others that do 10s.
And they do nice stuff.
Which would slide up very, very nicely and look very good next to each other and, produce some useful comparisons. But I want to flip the question I ambushed you with, perhaps to something more positive. Looking back now down the road as far as you've come, what are you proudest of?
That it exists at all.
Yeah, that's actually
I put words in your mouth. I don't mean to do
the
that.
answer. The answer is actually that we got here. It was a rough road, and I'm not. At any given moment, it was. I'm trying to think of an analogy for it, but it's been 4 years, and approximately 2 years of that was trying to get them produced. We had minimum viable product 2 years ago, but we didn't have an ample production solution available to us. We've now, in some way, shape, or form, worked with or talked to in significant ways 10 different manufacturers to do production for us as an OEM. We've paid money to 6 or so, around a half dozen, to do stuff, most of which effectively comes out to education's expensive, and nobody has screwed us. I mean, I guess that's something that I should probably frame for purpose of perspective pretty well. The last 2 years of trying to get these into production was really, really hard. And while we dealt with a whole bunch of people, none of the people that we dealt with treated us bad or wrong. That still didn't mean we could get it done.
Yeah.
It took us to here. So it's not, I mean, looking back on the question of is there an emerging B2B market that allows for OEM production of plastic, either by HIPS or by COCast in the US? Yes, there is. Does that mean that it's easy? No. The appeal, metal's not dead because I could go do it in my garage, right? Metal's not dead because I could buy the equipment, I could buy a spin caster, I could contract out the mold making and vulcanization, and I could produce them in my garage, and it has a relatively low, it's not that it's unskilled by any stretch. The people who spin metal know things, but the skill required to start is not incredibly high. Yeah. The skill required to do it very, very well is a different story, like many things. And that's still true today. That's still going to be true tomorrow. But the fact that there are a dozen or so OEMs that can provide plastic manufacturing, even if they didn't succeed in doing it for us under the conditions that we had and the needs that we had, blah, 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 speaks to the fact that is moving forward in North America.
I do want to ask, so you mentioned that, it's taken you a couple of years and some trial and error and working with a variety of different people to find something that you were happy with and somebody that could do what you wanted done to fulfill your vision. In terms of taking that long, was it waiting for somebody to actually develop the technology and ability to do that, or to actually stand up a facility, or was it that those people were out there and it just took you a while to find them?
The second one. Okay. I mean, we've been talking consistently for the last, I guess, going on 30 months, talking to different manufacturers. It's not like we were spending long periods of time where, geez, we're in touch with nobody. We just can't find somebody to roof my house. It wasn't like that. It was that we find somebody and we engage with them and we go, okay, so this is what we need you to do. This is the specs, blah, blah, blah. These are the numbers that we're looking at. This is the MSRP that we're looking to fulfill for these quantities of these things. And therefore that puts our cost basis around here. What can you do? And somebody will go, yeah, I think I can do that. What we were asking for was hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you asked me at the front end of this, what are we talking about? We're talking about a box that's got approximately 410 millimeter plastics, including lots of horses and cannons and wagons and stuffs, plus bases, plus flags, plus order marker tokens, plus stat cards, and it's under $100. That in itself was not easy.
Yeah.
If we wanted to charge $300 for it, it would not have been hard. we could have done that. But
you would have fit right in with some of the companies out there.
Yeah. But trying to do it at the price points that we wanted meant that the quality control had to be really, really tight. The efficiencies had to be really, really high. And that was difficult. And so it was, I think I can do that. Okay, we'll go down this road for a while. We'll try. What are we getting out? Well, this is the yield that we're getting out. Well, this is what this looks like. Well, I've got this molding problem. I'm not sure that we can make these castable unless we radically reduce the volume per shot, blah, 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 blah. And those aren't invalid problems. Those are totally, true problems. That's part of, and we're using, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but we're using COcast, which is it's thermocasting, right? They melt plastic and shoot it in under pressure, under vacuum, into a silicone mold. It is different than a HIPS or a PVC where you are shooting it into a steel or aluminum mold. There's goods and bads about each of those, and the product is a little bit different. But thermocasting as a tech is not new. Thermocasting in miniatures production is kind of new, and so there's a lot of spin up time in terms of skill within the industry.
If it's new for minis, what was it used for before? Dice?
I have no idea.
Oh.
I do know that it's existed for some period of time, but I don't know the history of the tech. I mean,
probably Kia parts,
It could be. I mean, HIPS, you think of what's high impact polystyrene used for, and you're like, oh, it's used for making models. Well, it's only used for making models because I used to put together tester models. The reality is that there's probably a bizarre amount of random stuff in my house, including the spork that I got from some random restaurant last week that was done in HIPS.
On your toaster oven,
Right. And so, the technology is not new, but it is new to this segment that's using it. And we were not asking for a very entry level thing. We're doing stuff that's really small is hard.
Yeah.
It's, you guys watched Inner Space.
Sure.
It turns out that miniaturization is not easy. And so that was part of the problem that we ran into with HIPS, was that HIPS is unforgiving of undercuts, effectively catch points in the mold, because it's using a metal mold. You cannot remove something that catches, and so you can't have that. Okay, well, that's fine. On my 25 or 28 millimeter figure, on my even like 20-ish millimeter figure, I can dull that edge, that relief for the chevrons on the drummer's arm, and no one will know the difference. I won't know the difference, but the figure's big compared to the amount of angle change that I did. Okay, well, now we're doing it on a 10 millimeter figure, and the angle change is comparatively huge to the surface area of the figure, and makes the detail look soft. Because we worked with an absolute great HIPS guy for several months trying to figure out how to make it work there, and it was what we were asking for simply wasn't going to work, and it didn't help it at all. It was a substantial problem there. Our miniatures were not originally sculpted for HIPS. Our figures were sculpted for metal or COcast, and so had that been done differently, we might be down a different path.
So that goes back to some of the trial and error where you mentioned sometimes education is just expensive. But at the end of it all, you want to end up with a product you're proud of, and that you're happy to put your name on. I'm sure there's plenty of people wondering, okay, great, we've got this on pre-order. Now what's next? Right. So I'm sure you guys have a plan in mind. Has it formed enough to where you're able to talk about what's coming next, when we might see it? Obviously, these are going to show up for Historicon or very shortly thereafter, start landing in people's mailboxes. By the time you come join us at Origins next summer, what are you bringing with you?
There you go.
So I can talk about everything but dates, because I don't. It's a question of production capacity right now. We spent the last 2 years trying to get production going, but we didn't stop development during that time. So we've got around 550 unique sculpts right
Seems
now.
like a few.
for 15 nationalities. We've got French from 1804 to 1815, everything but the guard. We haven't done greatcoats yet, though I'd like to. We've got
trying not to judge you.
But we've got them in bicorns. We've got chasseurs in leger chasseurs in side plumes. We've got grandiers in bearskin bonnets. We've got voltigeurs in colpacks. We've got all the different things. We've got all of their calf done. Again, outside.
Jim,
the
just
guard.
think about all the painting you're going to get to do for the next 4 or 5 years.
We've got Austrians from 1804 to 1815, except for the Landwehr, are complete. We've got Saxons for the mid-war. We don't have 1806 Saxons, and we don't have 1809 Saxons because they were a bit different. We do have 1812 Saxons done. We've got Portuguese for 1808 and 1809. We haven't done after they started changing their uniforms yet. We've got Spanish. So the Iberia campaign guide, for those who have that, in the back has a sampling of the hodgepodge of uniforms that the Spanish New Army regiments raised wore. We did figures for all of those. So that's, I don't know, a couple dozen. We've got the German division in Spain. So we've got Badeners and who else was there? Dutch, Converged Dutch, and now my brain is going without me. I was apparently shouldn't have gotten into such detail. But we've got
you should regret nothing.
The Nassauers for there. We haven't done. There were a couple squadrons of Hanoverian Cav that were in French service. We haven't done those yet, but we will. We've done.
It's taken a long time to not answer what's next.
We've done Poles. We have done the Vistula, including the Vistula Legion. We've done Württembergers. We've done Bavarians. We've done Russians, obviously. The last bits of Russian Cav, not all the Russian different Cossacks, and not the Opoleschi, the foot militia. But
we speak with reverence of the Opolchenya in these parts, but that's because we have people who lost very badly to them at Leipzig.
But the rest of the Russian cavalry that we don't have done were started today. The Prussians, we've got late war, again, minus reservists and Landwehr. We haven't done early war Prussians yet. So we've got quite a bit sort of in the back bench. So what comes next? It's going to be a question of production capacity. If we are able, we've got goal. We'll have stuff with us at Historicon. If you go to wargamingcompany.com and you pre-order something, you have an option to have it delivered to Historicon. You'll go to resellers and distributors starting in August. Depending on how fast production finishes that, we'll be starting the next thing. And the next thing will probably be more French and more Russians, because right now we're starting with just a core box of each. But we do have a couple of campaign guides in the works, and we do have a Spanish campaign guide published. And so our goal is to move towards 1-to-1 with our campaign guide, so that when you order a campaign guide, you can order the figures that are in it.
Yeah.
And Jim, to your question of compatibility and you don't plan to do everything. No, we totally tried to be as compatible as possible. Yes, you're correct. because why wouldn't you unless you're insane? People have existing collections, whatever. That's just the way it is. But we do plan to do everything. I mean that as literally as our campaign guides. We don't plan to depict anything in a campaign guide that we don't produce a miniature for.
That, I think, more than anything, would be the true... I'm absolutely willing to stipulate that nobody has worked with this sort of quantity and this scale and this material. But that probably more than anything else would be something no other Napoleonic serving company has done. And it just don't. I mean, I think of first companies I have great respect for. I want to be very clear, like the Perrys and people like that really do create some beautiful, beautiful minis. But even they freely admit, to borrow Jervis Johnson's phrase, they're a bit of a magpie.
Well, and it's hard not to be, because it's a grab bag of the number of different. I mean, we've effectively done French twice. We're gonna do them a third and a fourth time when we put them in greatcoats. We're gonna do them a fifth time when we do revolutionary figures, assuming that we get that far. We've done Austrians for before and after they change out helmets. We're going to do them again each way in gray coats, assuming that something doesn't stop us.
Very good.
And my point's not so much, oh my gosh, we're going to do all the things. My point is there's a heck of a lot. There's 30 different German countries. Now, are we going to do all 30 different Germanic states? Probably not. But we are going to do, we have the benefit that we chose to produce this line of campaign guides. And so we pick out a bunch of scenarios for a historical campaign based on what we think is playable and interesting and important to the narrative of the campaign. And then that dictates what troops go into the uniform guide. And what troops go into the uniform guide dictates what figures we make, physical miniatures of.
I want to ask, I know your wife does a ton of the color plates and the uniform research and everything, and the actual book artwork. Are you making her paint the figures too?
No, no. No, that doesn't go.
Just wondering. Yeah.
I wasn't
sure how deep you were going to delve down that path of putting the wife to work.
We have a pretty wonderful partnership, and the problem that we actually run into both with each other is I can ask you to do this thing, but knowing that there's only so many hours in the day, that means that there's some other thing that I can't ask you to do. Because one of these things is not getting done. Yeah. So there's a lot of that sort of calculus in our relationship. It's very practical that way, but we have a pretty wonderful partnership, and it's not very typical in this industry. But if you go out of this industry, I don't know that it's weird. Yeah.
I was just curious. I wasn't sure, again, knowing that she does so much of the artwork for you.
She does 100% of I color them typically. But she does 100% of the drawing of the line art of the uniform plates, and she does the majority of the research. That's somewhat shared, but she does just because it has to be, it's collaborative, but she does the vast majority of the research on there. I still give her a hard time with the fact that mostly she doesn't know what anything's called. And I don't often either, but so terminology is a failure point. But if you point at the object, we're like, oh yeah, I can tell you all sorts of random idiosyncrasies about when that cuff was introduced.
And turnbacks.
Yeah, goofy stuff. But that's a Swedish cuff.
Yeah, so of course it is. What did you think it was? Don't be ridiculous. So I guess since you've answered the all question that I had, if you're going to, and I know you hurt yourself with this stuff. I know this to be true. What if people come to Historicon? How many demo slots are you running?
I haven't done the math. So we've got at Historicon we're running 2 games are scheduled for Thursday, so that's 8. Friday, I believe we're the pandemic hurt us. We're dependent mostly on volunteer GMs for convention support, and a lot of things changed with the pandemic, just with people's lives changing and moving and what have you. And we've got a great team, but they're not necessarily all available when we wish they were. So on Thursday, there's 8 slots open. On Friday, there's 4 in the morning and 8 in the afternoon. So that puts us at a total of 20 Thursday and Friday. And then Saturday, there's 8 and 8. So that's 36, right? Yep. So there's 36 player slots that will be, I don't know when the Pell opens or when the Pell gets distributed or when registration opens, but there's 36 player slots for Historicon available to get in and do a intro to ESR Series 3. We'll have miniatures there for sale. We'll have miniatures there for display. We have not changed over all of our demo stock. I mean, we're kind of coming down to the wire with production. I mean, they're literally in production now. A whole bunch have been produced, but we're going to be running production pretty close up to Historicon for the initial run. And so the miniatures on the tabletops for our demo games will not be the miniatures we're releasing. They'll be the ones that we had previously supplied through a relationship that's ended when we provided our ESR box set several years ago. And we haven't changed out that demo stock yet, though that does provide a little bit of a nicety for people, because if you happen to be going to Historicon and you want to say, hey, I want to know how these compare against other traditional 10 millimeter brands, we'll have both. We'll have both painted and unpainted in our booth, and so you'll be able to hold one up to the other and see.
Yeah, so you sent us these very nice little sprues of the unpainted minis, and we've got the photos of them attached to this episode so folks can see what they're getting into, horizontal pockets and all. My question is, when are you going to send us some painted ones? See, because now all you've done is give me homework.
I thought Jim was going to send you painted ones.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was waiting for that to come around.
Well, you know what we haven't got? I mean, it's kind of come out.
Jim, you have assured me that you were done with the arts and crafts.
I know, right? Well, but then cool things happen.
You guys have said some generally complimentary things, and I very much appreciate that. But I have not. The one question that I had for each of you was, what do you think of these?
Oh, I think I answered that. When I made the inappropriate advance to a married man. I mean,
How would you describe them to people who don't have them sitting in front of them?
Great. Well, man, Brant, that was a better question than we asked.
Yeah, it was, but that's not unusual, right? You'd think that
I think
it's been doing this podcasting thing as long as me would have a better bank of questions built up.
I want to talk to my brothers and sisters, because I got to believe that I got some sisters out there in the Napoleonic gaming community. If you're into this for the Perrys, if you're into the 28s, it's all this other stuff, and that's where you game and you're on that range and stuff, still check them out. They're super cool, but they're not your thing because you're looking for that. If you are 18 and below, which means you're AB, Essex, Mini, Old Glory, all these other things, check them out. Take a look.
So here,
and why? Because people have begun to embrace the smaller scales. Why? I think a couple of reasons. Number one, although we owe an immense legacy to Don Featherstone, I really should say Mr. Featherstone, and Jack Scrooby and Joe Morshauser and these other guys that founded our hobby. They played with 25s because 25s is what they had. Yeah. And as we've opened up the world of Napoleonic gaming, as it has become more sophisticated, as it is learned from board games, the smaller scales have come out. And I'm telling you something, finding a miniature like this, affordable, well sculpted, good materials. As I said, I'm doing the the pre-prep, the trim, the base coat, the paint, all kind of in my head. And I'm seeing a pretty straightforward, fun process. I really am.
So I'm not the minis guy that Jim is, although I do have a giant stack of World War II stuff up on the top shelf of the game shelf here. Here's what I'll say, and for folks that are not minis folks, I hope this resonates with them a little bit. One of the cool things about seeing those giant minis battlefields is seeing the giant minis battlefield, right? You've got these mass regiments of little figures stomping their way around the battlefield that somebody had taken the time to lovingly do all that art, the arts and crafts work on these things. These guys look good enough that I wouldn't want to put them in such a mass formation, because then you wouldn't actually see the detail on them. Like I know that sounds completely batshit crazy to Napoleonic gamers. Like, what do you mean you don't want a whole regiment of French guys? No, like, these guys look good enough that I would want to be able to inspect them at an individual level and go, wow, that looks really cool. Not like have to pick up a whole rack of them and like kind of get it at the right angle to see how the backpacks are painted or whatever. So as a guy who's not a minis gamer, but can appreciate the work that goes into prepping the minis for gaming, these are figures that deserve to be individually inspected for the level of detail that they have on them, even as small as they are, because it's remarkable how good they look at that size. So, I mean, they look good at any size, but it's especially at this size, how good they look for where they are. They're really nicely done. And even when I showed my wife, who doesn't know squat about wargaming stuff other than it takes up a lot of my time, she was kind of looking at them and go, wow, these are really cool. That's not permission from her to get into the mini side of the hobby, mind you. But she
can help you.
No. I have more than enough to do without adding an arts and crafts project to this. So, but I think that's the thing I would say, and I mean that, with all of the nicety that I can possibly cram in there. These guys look really good, and shoving them onto a base with 48 other figures to me would be like, well, damn it, now I can't see the detail, right? And again, like, half the Napoleonic guys are busy yelling back at the podcast. What's this moron talking about? Well, look, again, I'm not a minis guy, but these look cool. If Jim were zooming in on these in Tabletop Simulator, they would make a really good splash graphic for Saturday Night Fights on the front page of our website. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So what you're saying is that Jim is looking for sponsorship on Saturday Night Fight.
I didn't say that. That you jumped to that conclusion yourself. I am not going to claim credit for, other than to say that I drew a bunch of hopscotch squares on the sidewalk and you happen to trip over them. As we start to wrap this up, again, this off the wall oddball special edition of Mention and Dispatches that we've snuck in here. You've told us when we're going to see these escape into the wild, and given us a sense of sort of what the backlog looks like, so we can hope to start seeing what's next. Obviously, as we start to see new campaign guides from you, that sort of tacitly lays out the roadmap of what might be coming next in the boxes of minis. Are we going to start to see any sort of painting competitions or the arts and crafts skills kinds of competitions, or are these just straight up paint them, put them on a map, let's go play games?
That would be lovely. Okay, so we're trying to wrap up, and now you just kind of opened up a can of worms. I was literally talking to somebody this afternoon about the fact that the things that make historical gaming difficult to get into are not rule books. They're not miniatures. They're the social community aspect of it, and building communities around game systems is not easy. And people often look across the water and are like, oh, England, it's the place where the miniatures games happen. Oh, it glows, but it's so warm. Yeah, it's also the size of like New Jersey. The fact is that here it actually takes more than 20 minutes to reach the other side of the country. So you have, because our density is so much different, that mandates that our communities are a lot different, just because we're more dispersed. And the building painting contests and remote campaigns, and I'll give another plug to Firelock, because they're good friends, and they're great people, and they make really nice stuff. With Blood and Plunder, it has taken them quite some time to build a community, and they've been very fortunate in the community partners that they've met, the enthusiasts that they've met. This is still a very, very incredibly enthusiast-driven hobby, and that's true on the sci-fi and fantasy side as well. I'm not only a historical gamer, I'm a big BattleTech guy. I've been playing BattleTech since, I don't know, I was short. And
since Battle Droids.
I did come in after Battle Droids, although my earliest copy of the rule book is the white staple bound one that came in a starter box. But they just did a $7.5 million Kickstarter with a 40-year-old game. A 40 fucking year old game. They just did a $7.5 million
for the essentials box that they cut.
Yeah, and they're BattleTech is in Target.
Exactly.
In Target, and there are people. I understand where they're coming from. I understand the emotion of they're like, oh, it's an exclusive. Yeah, they're in Target. Okay. So Target's order, they said this on their AMA session. I think Randall talked about this, was that their deal with Target is for the same number of units that they sold over 4 years.
Yeah, I think it was 4 years.
And
which doesn't surprise me.
That's the initial order. So, and people are like, oh, money, sellout. No, availability. They're putting it in front of people who never would have frickin' seen it before.
Yeah. So a couple of things there. One, nobody complains about Munchkin selling out when it shows up in Target. Right. So that's number one. And nobody complained about like Seven Wonders selling out when it showed up in Target. The gatekeeping guys just drive me batshit crazy. Those guys annoy the hell out of me. The flip side of it is, if you're the college baseball player who gets a chance to sign a pro contract for $1.5 million, you take it and run, and nobody says, "Oh, that guy's a sellout." If you're Catalyst Games and you get a chance to put generational wealth in your pocket by selling your game in Target, you take the money and run. And anybody that complains about you selling out can go stuff it.
Well, and
seriously,
I'm going to tie it back to the community thing though, because the reason that they had a $7.5 million Kickstarter is in their second one. I don't remember what the Clan Invasion Kickstarter ended at. Was it like 2.5?
I think it was just under 2.5.
Okay. But
Mercenaries blew it out of the water,
right? And Mercenaries did, I think, 2.5 in the first 12 or 18 hours.
Yeah.
But it's community driven. There's a ridiculous amount. People who are involved in the artwork that's leading to the models that we are now pledging money for on a Kickstarter are not career sculptors who got a gig at Catalyst. They're people who loved BattleTech and wanted to give to that community. And that was, I'm not saying that it's all altruistic or that there's no compensation. I have no idea. I don't know what any of those arrangements are. I don't know how any of those people fit into the mix, except for the fact that the way that they got connected initially was they wanted to be part of this community. They didn't go audition for a job like they were auditioning for a 7-Eleven job.
Yeah.
And whether it is, Firelock has got great partners with Blood and Pigment. What's Blood and Pigment? It's a bunch of community enthusiasts who care about the game and are involved and are helping make it grow. And that's the community nature of our hobby is not. Every so often I get questions about how is our hobby changing and how are historicals changing and blah 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 blah, and is the world ending and are metals dead? But
I haven't left.
but the fact is, our hobby, our big H hobby, our large umbrella, all of the different types of sub hobbies are under it, is bigger than it's ever been. It's more popular than it's ever been. It's offering better quality. It's offering greater diversity of offerings in product, in games, available to a broader audience than ever before. And that is entirely due to community. That's entirely due to the enthusiasts that say, hey, I really like this game and I want this game to do well because I enjoy it. So I'm going to try and do some stuff to support this game. And maybe that stuff is I go to my local hobby shop and start asking people if they want to play this on Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
And maybe this is I start posting pictures of the stuff that I paint for this game that I like on Facebook.
Yeah.
And maybe it is I go to game conventions and I put on an event. All of those things, some are bigger, some are smaller, some are things you're doing already, some of them are not. Those are what decides how successful a game is.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, people are going to see this. It's a form of advertisement. Somebody is going to order stuff, and I am thankful that they are going to, and that is fantastic. Honestly, if they never play it after they buy it from me, that does not make me happy. That makes me sad. So you asked earlier what makes me proudest about the miniatures project. Being able to get it done and get it shared with people. We started the Wargaming company in 2015, like January or February. And the first goals that we had were don't lose money, because it was our own. And
amazing how low the bar is when you start,
right? Try not to lose money because it's yours. And I wanted to someday walk in somewhere and see complete strangers playing a game that I made.
Yeah.
That was like my high thing. And it was 2016. I'm trying to remember what the year of the last Historicon in Fredericksburg was. There were more games.
It'd be 16.
Yeah, there were more games of ESR Napoleonics being run by not us than were being run by us.
That's pretty cool.
They were by people I didn't know, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is so cool!"
Did you geek any of them? Going, so what do you think of that game?
So as far as the miniatures,
put the sunglasses on,
Boy, I heard ESR really sucks. What do you think?
This game's terrible. It doesn't let me win the way I want to. But the thing that I'm proud of the most with the miniatures is that we're getting them out there. We get to share them with people. We did all of this work, and it wasn't just for ourselves.
Yeah,
people can have these. We're going to produce them, and we're not. Economics are economics. We have to charge enough for them that we can afford to do this. But and we have to charge low enough that people will buy them. But it's still a community-based hobby. It's still, if you don't want to make the place better, then you're in the wrong place. You should be getting famous somehow.
And there's nothing wrong with making the community a little bigger either. So
right,
I mean, that's a whole separate podcast, mind you. But,
yes,
but there's nothing wrong with that either. So, David, thank you very much for taking the time to join us on this one. And Jim, thank you very much for ducking out of whatever familial commitment you had to be here for tonight. Appreciate that too. So, I'm sure there was something.
I want to thank both of you very, very much for making the time and adding this in, because that is another form of community support. And what you guys do is great.
No, I enjoy the podcast. It's just we got to put it on summer hiatus because at a certain point I have to actually finish all the prep work for Origins to make all that stuff go. And
which is another way that you support the community and the hobby.
As you've said, there's only so many hours in the day to go around, and sooner or later I got to go be dad at a certain point as well. So There's that too. So great. Audience, look, we've got Origins coming up shortly. Come see us there. We're probably going to do a couple of live hits from Origins as well. We're going to be back with the actual real next season of the podcast in the fall. Once these have escaped into the wild, we're going to see about maybe bringing David back at the toward the end of that season to see how it's going with the minis and how far behind he is on production to keep up with all the orders you guys have given him. And maybe by then he will have actually committed to whatever comes next. We'll see if we can get there too. So for now, thank you and good night. And we appreciate you guys listening to this special edition of Mentioning Dispatches.